mental health disorders are a leading cause of disability. One company, Alto Neuroscience, has a platform meant to match patients with the right psychiatric medications. I'm joined now by Dr. Amit Etkin, President and CEO of Alto Neuroscience. Welcome to the New York Stock Exchange.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
We know that when prescribing medication, it's often a trial and error process, with a lot of people not receiving the right medication on the first try. How does your platform aim to solve that?
So right now, when anybody is prescribed a medication, it's done based really just on their symptoms. For example, in depression, feel sad, unmotivated, appetite, sleep disruption, all of these sorts of things. We don't actually ever do a test for what's driving their depression at the level of biology. And so that leaves us with guesswork. And unfortunately, most people don't respond to any given medication. And there's not a lot of variety in our medications as it is, which means that a lot of people just won't respond to anything. So where we are is a lot of cycling between medications in the clinic. What we're trying to do at Alto is do two things at the same time. One is develop brain tests, we call biomarkers, to understand the function or dysfunction in different brain systems, important for depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, that guide response to medication, and then simultaneously develop new medications that target those brain systems more directly. And so this is a precision medicine for the brain approach, which is find the right people, understand their biology, and target that with a new medication that's more effective because it is more targeted.
In the most basic sense, for someone who doesn't really know that much about AI, how is AI, determining all of this? How is it measuring biomarkers? How is it aiding to create this new medication? Like in the most practical sense, can you describe how it works?
So the use of AI is really as a tool for analyzing data. The data, for example, if I get a brainwave recording or an EEG, electroencephalography test on you, I'm getting a lot of information out of that recording when I do it, and I don't necessarily know what the right signals are that differentiate who responds and who doesn't respond. And that's where we're using AI or machine learning to help us say, of all of that signal, how do we reduce it down to what's most important? That then becomes the basis of a test, identify whether you're likely to respond or not for that drug that we're developing. And that's a little bit different from how a lot of people now experience AI, which is a large language model like a ChatGPT. We also use those tools in other ways, but it's a way of, for us, decoding what's going on in the brain so that we can drive development of drugs specifically for those people who would respond better.
Does your platform take a certain level of motivation from the person seeking support? And what is the buy-in for the patient and for the psychiatrist who's prescribing the medication?
So that's a great question. And I'm both a neuroscientist and a psychiatrist, so I understand the reality in the clinic out there, which is because we do no tests. Psychiatrists don't really know how to do or interpret tests often. And you have to think about the burden as you're highlighting for the patient. And so we've actually embedded that into our testing and biomarker approach. For example, an EEG test we think could be done in the home or the office. We're already doing that, as a matter of fact, within minutes. So you do the test, you record for 10 minutes, and you get the result right away. Pretty easy to do. A cognitive test to tell you about how your memory is functioning or your attention. All of that can be done again within minutes on a computer. So we know the ask has to be right-sized for the reality of the clinic today. And yet the data are so rich that you get from that I actually think that is the right sizing, that we can implement in the near term these tests, even in a world which we're hoping to transform that currently doesn't really do tests to select medications.
And is the patient answering questions about themselves? How are you gathering this data?
So we're trying to make our biomarker tests the most objective and direct as possible. So a brainwave recording is just a passive recording of brain activity through sensors or electrodes you put on the head. So they just sit there, eyes open, eyes closed, relaxed, and we read that information out from their brain activity. They could also be doing a test of their memory, for example, giving them lists of words and seeing how many they recall later. All of those things are more objective than asking them about their symptoms, which are how well are you sleeping, what's your appetite like, what's your mood like, that are subjective. And really those are the limitations of how we operate in the clinic now, is entirely subjective. And what we're doing is adding the objective, which is critical because that's the level of biology.
We've seen a rise in genetic testing and trying to match patients with the proper psychiatric meds. Is this different?
Yeah, so genetic testing hasn't really played out in psychiatry, in part because a lot of the genetic tests just don't explain a lot of what happens. Our view is you have to actually get as close to the organ that's generating the symptoms, which is your brain, as possible. And that's why we do tests that are more of direct brain function or indirect things, even like a wearable, right? If you think about your circadian rhythms, your activity during the day, sleep at night, the structure and amount of your sleep, all of that is more objective and closer to what the brain is doing than a genetic test. But we look at all biomarkers, we look at all biology that we can test, because at the end of the day, we're simply trying to move the needle on our medications, however it best plays out.
Your company has said that a lot of the psych meds on the market now are very similar, and that's why you're creating your own. Can you talk about the state of the medication now and how you seek to improve it?
So in areas where we even have medications like depression, they've basically come through a serendipitous observation decades ago, and then companies essentially tweaking on that observation. So we have SSRIs, SNRIs, and the like, which are all very, very similar. In other areas, there's no treatments at all. In schizophrenia, where it's the cognitive problems that are driving a lot of the dysfunction and disability in those patients, there's no treatments to speak of. And so we have to move ourselves out of that box. We can't just tweak. We have to find entirely new mechanisms, therefore that have potentially unique effects, but also find the people who respond to those. And that's that interplay that we're then doing in advancing both a new medication and a test for that medication at the same time.
Okay, so is your platform in the clinical stage right now?
It's entirely clinical. So we're in phase 2, which is sort of a mid-stage of clinical testing, and especially in late phase 2. So we have 3 what are called phase 2B studies that are basically pushing right into phase 3 or registrational activity. So that's definitive evidence of efficacy as you move to later stages that you get from these trials. We're not looking for kind of new exploratory signals. We're looking to see if we can actually demonstrate whether a drug works. And what's most exciting is this is coming in the next 1 to 2 years across our various programs.
And the range of patients that you're seeing, are you specifically working with people who have treatment-resistant depression, or is it your average person who's, depressed, having a hard time? Like, what kinds of patients are you working with?
So we skew towards the more resistant, harder to treat populations, because that's really where the need is clinically. That's where the big hole in our treatment options are. So whether it's treatment-resistant depression or people who have not responded adequately to an antidepressant and you add something on top, or consider even bipolar disorder, where in depression and bipolar disorder, the only options are antipsychotics, which carry a lot of side effects with them. So there's a whole world of opportunity there because a lot of those patients don't respond. As we focus on where the clinical need is, it becomes clarifying for how to actually do the work to develop the drugs. And much like the way other areas have developed, for example, in oncology, bringing the precision approach, bringing the tools in to the areas of highest need becomes a really exciting opportunity for change.
Dr. Amit Etkin, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.